Hi, welcome to a new film recapped. Today we're watching The Menu, a thrilling dish, if I may say so. Enjoy. Tyler and his date, Margot, wait for the boat at the local dock that will transport them to a private island. There, they will have dinner at Hawthorne, a very exclusive restaurant run by the nation's top chef. Tyler is a foodie who is fascinated by this chef's techniques and the specifics of fine dining in particular. The two of them are taken aback by the number of notable individuals who will be sailing with them when the boat arrives. There's post-prime actor George with his secretary and lover Felicity, a trio of significant tech business investors, Dave, Soren, and Bryce, and Lillian, the food critic who discovered the chef and her editor Ted. Nevertheless, Margot finds herself drawn to businessman Richard and his spouse Anne. This is because she is aware of Richard and attempts to avoid drawing his notice. Margot isn't impressed when Tyler gushes over the first nice food they are served during the trip while he snaps a picture. The maitre d'Elsa addresses Margot by a different name when they finally get at the island, forcing Tyler to clarify that there was a change in plans and that he arrived with a different date, which makes for an awkward situation overall. Prior to dinner, guests are given a tour of the restaurant by Elsa, who explains that the staff members do all of the farming and hunting, which is why everyone lives here. Although his home is off limits, the chef resides on the island as well. When they eventually do make it into the restaurant, they find that the kitchen is an open space where they can observe the cooks at work. On one of the tables is an elderly woman named Linda who appears to be completely out of place. Richard asks his wife to switch seats with him so he may have a better look when he eventually realizes Margot's presence. Everyone is told by Elsa that while it is permitted to see the cooks at work, photos are not. The cooks had to ask Tyler to quit distracting them since he approaches them right away to point out all the tricks they're applying and to ask a ton of questions. Chef Slowick enters at that very time, and Elsa tells him something that causes him to fix his gaze on Margot. The complimentary snack is served first. Felicity is preoccupied with trying to end her relationship with George, while Lillian takes her time preparing the food, carefully sniffing and tasting each item. Tyler feels the need to proudly convey the significance of this to Margot, who enjoys the dish but isn't much into it. It's time for the first course shortly after. All of Slowick's cooks spin around in unison like dedicated little soldiers as he steps forward and claps his hand. Then he gives a speech about his work and tells everyone to enjoy and relish their food instead of just eating it. Tyler tries to comment on that but just gets reprimanded by Slowick for interfering. Tyler continues to take photos despite the ban. Slowick claps once again as he introduces the second dish, explaining that although bread is the primary meal of the ordinary man, his guests are not common, so they would not be receiving any bread. The next dish is a breadless plate with just a few tiny dotlets of the savory toppings. Tyler definitely loves it, but Margot thinks it offensive. They send an entire bowl of the emulsion to Lillian's table in irony because she believes it looks a little divided. Even after pointing out that they work for Doug Varick, the island's real owner, the tech bros, who feel the joke is getting too far, are turned down for bread. Elsa violently assures them that they will eat more than they deserve and less than they want in an attempt to silence them. When Tyler tries to grab Margot's food for himself, he breaks a glass by mistake because she won't finish it. Tyler tries to apologize as Slowick quickly arrives at the table, but the chef is more curious as to why Margot isn't eating. When Margot points out that there isn't any food, Slowick says he purposefully made the amount small enough so she won't become full if she doesn't eat. When Margot still won't touch the food, Slowick gets a little upset and leaves, surprising everyone by casually asking how Linda is doing. When Margot can't help but turn to face Richard, Anne observes and remarks that Margot resembles their deceased daughter. Pretending to be unfamiliar with Margot, Richard requests his wife to change the topic. Slowick gives another clap to announce the third meal, Memory, which inspires him to reminisce about the early taco nights spent with his family. He admits that Linda is his mother and that she has been alcoholic since he was a young child. Initially, his father was an alcoholic, and after Linda confronted him about it one evening, the guy attempted to murder her by using the phone wire. Little Slowick took a pair of scissors and stabbed his father in the thigh in order to save his mother, but he now regrets not killing him. The meal is a smoked chicken thigh served on top of a phone cable with a pair of scissors inside to commemorate that memorable taco night. The tortillas were made freshly, but a laser machine was used to engrave them to give them a unique touch. The narrative disturbs everyone, but when they find out about the memories on the tortillas, things get even more difficult. Lillian discovers images of places that shut down as a result of her negative evaluations, while Anne is horrified to see pictures of her husband's personal life. In one in particular, Richard is seen hanging out with an unusual woman, but he insists it's pure fun. When George discovers images from his role in the poorly received film, Dr. Sunshine, the computer bros become upset because they discover their company's tax documents, which demonstrate that they generated invoices with fictitious expenses. Elsa cryptically states that it won't be necessary when the guys threaten to close down this place, refusing to divulge how they came to know that information. Tyler believes Slowick despises him when he sees himself snapping photos of the food. Margot wants to return the dish because she thinks the images are offensive, but Tyler yells at her and calls her a child for misbehaving. When Margot, hurt, decides to use the restroom, Elsa hurries to stop her from going through a silver door that is off limits. When Margot arrives in the restroom, she sees a worker running with a set of angel wings in his arms as she approaches the window to take a smoke. Slowick arrives at that point to question Margot about her refusal to eat again since he is offended by her behavior, but Margot simply responds that she isn't that hungry. Slowick is also curious about her true identity and finds it hard to believe her when she says she's just Margot from Nebraska. A moment later, the chefs lay out some decorations and a piece of cloth on the floor to begin setting up the fourth dish. Slowick presents Jeremy, one of his sous chefs, who made the mess, the next meal, to the group. Jeremy attended a prestigious culinary school, and his goal has always been to work for Slowick. Although Slowick acknowledges Jeremy's talent, he doesn't think Jeremy is particularly excellent. While Jeremy may aspire to live a life of distinction similar to Slowick's, Slowick believes that his life is burdened by criticism and unhappy clients who will never value his work. When Jeremy responds negatively to Slowick's question about wanting that life, the latter gives him a kiss on both cheeks and backs off just in time while Jeremy pulls out a gun. After that, Slowick declares the fourth course, and Jeremy concludes in public. Except for Tyler, who finds this fascinating, all of the guests panic out and retreat as the other cooks observe quietly, unsurprised by this. Slowick encourages everyone to have a seat and acknowledge that this is all part of the act while the body is being removed. Richard has had enough of everyone debating whether or not the death was real. Elsa stops him when he tries to depart with Anne, saying there isn't a boat available. Elsa gives the chefs the order to seize Richard and chop his ring finger because he is still adamant. All of the guests begin to panic once more, with the exception of Tyler, who is delighted to continue eating. Elsa hands Anne the fallen wedding ring as Richard screams in agony on the ground. Lillian accepts Slowick's explanation that this is part of the menu once more, but the others are beginning to show signs of fear. Felicity suggests that George speak with Slowick because they are purportedly friends, but George admits that he lied to win her over. When Elsa brings Margot into the kitchen, Slowick informs her that she is just stupid. She wasn't included in the initial menu plan, so it's problematic that he can tell she isn't a Margot. It doesn't really matter because everyone is going to die tonight, but Slowick is curious as to whether Margot is siding with the customers or the restaurant. With tears in her eyes, Margot storms back to her seat and gives Tyler a slap for his persistent chatter about the meal. The dining room is filled with a tense, apprehensive atmosphere. Elsa just leads Soren back to his table when he loses his mind and tries to smash a window with the chair, which is made of indestructible glass. After serving tea as an introduction for the next course, Slowick takes the opportunity to inquire if anyone has concerns. George answers Tyler's foolish query regarding the tea and asks what's going on. According to Slowick, the elements in a degustation concept shouldn't come as a surprise. Ted indulges Lillian, who, for instance, is a monster who closes restaurants due to her own preferences. More broken emulsion is brought by the cooks for Lillian, and Elsa gives Margot a kitchen timer with 10 minutes remaining. When Anne requests for a doctor to see Richard, Slowick responds that, after being the most dedicated clients for 5 years, they are unable to recall a single dish from their meal here. Slowick put a lot of effort into becoming a highly sophisticated chef, but it wasn't until lately that he realized he was doing all of this work to please unsatisfied individuals, like his own mother. Bryce corrects Slowick when he refers to the establishment as his restaurant, pointing out that Doug Varick is the real owner. It then becomes clear that Doug is hanging outside while wearing the angel wings as Slowick responds that he truly owns Doug. When Slowick rejects Dave's attempt to buy his rescue with money, he tries to flee but is prevented by personnel. While Bryce notes that Doug kept Slowick open during the pandemic, Slowick complains because Doug persistently questions his menu. After Elsa gestures with her arms for Doug to be lowered into the water till he drowns, Slowick declares he's at last free before heading to his office. Margot's table timer suddenly rings, and she is requested to go see Slowick. Margot acknowledges that she shouldn't be here, and Slowick responds by saying he can tell that Margot is a fellow employee of the business. He's curious as to why Margot continued to stare at Richard, forcing her to admit that she works as a street seller. Richard was among the select few clients who could make her uneasy, since he desired for her to assume the role of his daughter during their amorous moments. Slowick and Margot concur that their dislike for their work comes from unpleasant customers, even though they used to love helping others. Slowick then leads everyone outside. Sub-chef Catherine serves the following course and explains that Slowick has repeatedly flirted with her, but she has always said no. Although Slowick did not dismiss her, he did avoid looking her in the eye, which served as the inspiration for the following dish, Man's Folly. Slowick then has to apologize after Catherine stabs him in the leg, hugs him, and stains his chef costume with blood. All of the male guests are now offered the opportunity to flee. They will have 45 seconds to do so before staff members attempt to apprehend them. Tyler is the only man who doesn't start running, so Slowick has to send him outside while Catherine brings the women inside. Sitting at the same table as Catherine, who says that everyone dies, was her idea, the women try the 6th course. She starts crying at Lillian's praises, so the other women start praising her too to keep her happy. When Anne asks Margot if she knows her husband, Margot acknowledges that she does, but Anne stays silent. In the end, Margot confesses that she is from Massachusetts and goes by Aaron. Tyler, who detests missing a class, watches them from outside via the window. Regardless of whether the men went to the beach or the forest, the staff follows them and finds them unharmed. Ted was rewarded with a passard egg for his efforts to hide in the smokehouse. After the men are all brought back to the restaurant, Felicity confesses to stealing money from George after he cynically apologizes to her for being a failure. Felicity knew that George already knew. All of a sudden, Slowick says that the meal cannot go forward as scheduled until they have resolved a disagreement. He confronts Tyler and forces him to acknowledge that he had always known that Everyone Dies would be on the menu tonight. After his girlfriend ended their date, Tyler hired Margot because the restaurant didn't take bookings for just one person, and he didn't give a damn that she might die. This news upsets Margot, who attacks Tyler. However, the staff quickly releases them. Then, Slowick demands that Tyler cook in front of everyone even though Tyler doesn't want to, pointing out how much Tyler knows about food and giving him a chef's suit before forcing him into the kitchen. Tyler is a messy cook, which results in an absolutely disastrous final dish, especially since Slowick always making fun of him for being Mr. Knowledgeable Foodie. After telling Tyler that he is the reason the mystery has been removed from his artwork, Slowick whispers something in his ear, causing Tyler to remove his chef jacket and start crying. Later, Slowick approaches Margot one-on-one to request a favor. They need a big bucket, which Elsa neglected to bring, that should be in a corner before they can begin making dessert. Elsa believes the staff can handle it, but Slowick wants Margot to go get it. Margot doesn't care that Tyler stopped things for himself when she finds out on her way out. When Slowick eventually makes his way back to the dining area, George remarks that this isn't really fair. Slowick adds that George is being punished for ruining his first day off in months by seeing Dr. Sunshine a few years earlier. Felicity, on the other hand, will pass away because she left Brown University debt-free. Margot arrives at the smokehouse in the meantime, but she takes a knife rather than the barrel. Later, she slips into Slowick's residence, which is a replica of the diner but furnished with a bed. Margot tries to exit through the silver door, but Elsa, holding her own knife, stops her and tells her that this is not allowed. Margot is suddenly attacked by Elsa, who tells her she doesn't want to be replaced. Elsa asserts that she didn't forget the barrel and that Slowick was the one who never asked for it, while Margot defends herself with items from the kitchen and states that she doesn't want to work here. After a struggle on the ground between the two women, Margot accidentally kills Elsa by attempting to keep the knife away from her body. Once Margot calms down, she takes Elsa's keys and opens the silver door. She discovers a modest chamber filled with Slowick's recollections of his happier days, when he worked as a hamburger maker and had a family. Margot attempts to use the radio in the room to make an assistance request. Upon returning to the restaurant, Bryce is greeted with a cake, as his buddies had informed them of his birthday. When Margot bursts in through the main door with the barrel, Slowick reminds her that although he was once a monster, everything he does now is pure. Because he can no longer be injured, his chef hands are so strong that he can touch flames without experiencing any pain. When a boat gets closer to the island at that point, Slowick discovers Margot used the radio. As soon as the crew removes all bloodstains off everyone, Slowick threatens to kill an innocent guy if the guests beg for assistance. When Coast Guard Dale walks into the restaurant, no one dares to ask what the issue is. Then, noticing that Dale is a huge admirer of Dr. Sunshine, George pretends to give him an autograph when he requests for one. Dale pulls out a rifle as he is about to depart, realizing that the piece of paper actually means, "Help us," and preparing to defend the visitors who have now mustered the courage to speak. After a few moments of keeping the gun on Slowick, Dale turns around and points it toward the candle on Margot's table, exposing it to be nothing more than a pistol-shaped lighter. Dale is one of Slowick's employees, not a Coast Guard, and he can now go back to the kitchen. Slowick believes Margot to be just as wicked as the other visitors and is furious with her for betraying him. Recalling what she witnessed inside the house, Margot chooses to take a chance. She abruptly claps to catch Slowick's attention and says she wants to return his dinner because she doesn't like it. When Margot reveals that all of the dishes were more of an intellectual exercise than a pleasure, Slowick succumbs to her deceptive methods. She wants to eat a real cheeseburger, not some sophisticated, deconstructed waste, because she's still hungry. Slowick grins for the first time of the day and agrees to make a classic cheeseburger and fries for $9.95. As Slowick proudly serves Margot a classic cheeseburger, the other chefs are enthralled with his pleasant demeanor. After taking a sample, Margot says it tastes good, but she also requests that the remainder be taken away because she can't finish it all. Since Slowick is still in a daze, she follows his instructions. After Margot gets her purse, she exits the restaurant with a $10 bill. Margot is hesitant to leave because the others are still in danger, but Anne signals for her to continue. As Margot arrives at the harbor and departs aboard the boat that Dale abandoned, Slowick reminds everyone that it is time to make their payments. Under a no-tip policy, each person pays $1,250 and receives a bag of goodies that includes one of Doug's fingers. After everyone has handed over their credit cards, Slowick says it's time for dessert. The chefs start by plating the floor, then dressing the visitors in marshmallow vests and chocolate hats. The dessert, the s'more, will be the most unpleasant assault on the human palate, as Slowick reminds everyone, since they symbolize the devastation of his life and are now going to be a part of it. Since this is often served over a fire, Slowick uses his bare hands to remove a lump of coal from the oven and tosses it onto the decorations the cooks left behind. This starts a fire that spreads throughout the restaurant and kills everyone within. As the restaurant burns down, Margot uses the copy of the menu that came with the gift bag to wipe her lips and stops the boat to finish her cheeseburger. Subscribe for more movies.